The story of Salem. The king of Salem was overjoyed when I handed him the jar containing the scroll. As I unrolled it, I was surprised to see his attention drawn to the last section of the scroll that was still empty. As if reading something there, he said to me, "Abraham, of all that you have written, nothing moves me more than the story you will record in the last part of your manuscript." Melchizedek then showed me a scroll, written inside and out, on which he had written for those 6 years the history of the universe, according to revelations made to him by an angel. Taking my manuscript, he sewed it together, forming a large scroll. Having done this, he carefully rolled it up and placed it inside the jar. When the 8th day of the feast arrived, in an act that surprised everyone, the king exalted the jar, placing it on his throne. Seeing the vessel that had been so humiliated and rejected, now glorified amid the praises of Salem, I felt a strong emotion and wept. It was impossible to look at it without thinking of its significance. It was a perfect symbol of the promised Messiah. Through him, many lives had been freed and transformed, beginning with mine. Without the gift of that jar, I would not have in my arms today my beloved Isaac, for whom Sarah and I had waited so long. After enthroning the jar, Adonijah's son, calling me to the throne, proceeded to honor me before all the faithful. Taking the golden box in which he had placed the 144 pearls of tithing, he placed it in my hands, declaring it a gift from him to Isaac. As if that were not enough, he took the vessel containing the precious scroll and placing it at my feet, declared that it belonged to me and my descendants forever. With my heart filled with joy, I prostrated myself before the king who offered me such a precious gift, extending my hands to him with the box of pearls. Taking it from my hands, he placed it inside the jar beneath the scroll, reaffirming his gift. As I walked to my room that night, with Sarah, Isaac, and the jar containing their treasures by my side, I experienced a happiness I had never felt in my entire life. Since I had difficulty falling asleep, I lay awake for a long time, imagining the glorious future of Isaac and the jar, whose message of love, justice, and peace would bring hope to my descendants for all generations until the coming of the Messiah. Imagining this happy future, I fell asleep and had a dream in which I suffered greatly. In the dream, Yahweh appeared to me and said, "Abraham, now take the jar you love so much and take it to the salt sea, where I will show you a cave in which you will hide it." After giving me this order, the Eternal gave me a small hatchet and a linen cloak with which I wrapped the jar. I then began a painful journey, carrying on my shoulders the one who symbolized the fulfillment of all my hopes. When I reached the northern region of the sea, I was led to the cave that was supposed to hide the jar. Placing it on a rock in a gesture of farewell, I began to caress it while contemplating the ornaments and inscriptions that adorned it. The thought that I would no longer have it with me filled me with profound sadness. My eyes turned to the figure of Melchizedek, who was bending down to receive it, laden with jewels. Suddenly the king's figure began to come to life and move, and grew until the entire jar transformed into a handsome young man who gazed at me lovingly. I thought at first it was the king of Salem, but looking at his hands I found no scars. Seeing that his eyes were so similar to Sarah's, I asked him his name. He replied with a smile that he was Isaac, my son. I was rejoicing in Isaac's presence when the divine voice again rang in my ears, saying, "Abraham, take now your son, whom you love, and sacrifice him with the hatchet I gave you." Terrified by the divine command, I fell at Isaac's feet, finding neither the strength nor the courage to carry out the terrible act. However, he consoled me, affirming his willingness to fulfill the divine will. After a terrible inner struggle, I made the decision to sacrifice my son. Upon rising, I saw Isaac writhing in great agony, while his body became covered with foul-smelling sores. I felt the desire to help him, healing his wounds, but the voice insisted on its order for me to sacrifice him. I then took the hatchet and raised it over his neck. As my arms moved to strike, a bright flash illuminated us, and I felt the hatchet no longer in my hands. As I raised my head, I came face to face with the pilgrim who had announced the birth of Isaac. He was dressed in shining garments of fine linen, white and pure. His face shone like the sun as he looked at me with infinite love. Embracing me, he wiped my tears and said, "Abraham, now I know that you truly love me, because you have not withheld from me either the jar or your beloved son. Because of this love, I will make you the father of faith, and many peoples and nations will rejoice in the light of the scroll given to you." Having said these words, the pilgrim walked toward Isaac, who was writhing in pain, placing his hands on his head. This contact caused all the impurities that had manifested themselves in festering sores on my son's body to be transferred to his body, while his glory was transferred to Isaac. I was overcome with a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief at seeing Isaac restored, but distressed at seeing the Messiah oppressed by so many sins. Amid groans of pain, he declared, "I will die, so that Isaac and his descendants may be justified, redeemed, and glorified before Yahuwah." When I turned to my son who had been freed, I saw that his place had been taken by 12 young men named Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. When I presented the suffering pilgrim to them, they despised him, seeing no beauty in him that attracted them. Finally, they led him like a lamb and sacrificed him, throwing his body into that cave. Soon after, the darkness of a long night descended, during which we were attacked by a great army that, after wounding us, uprooted us from our land, scattering us among the nations. There, all who encountered us humiliated and persecuted us, accusing us of the pilgrim's death, and thus we suffered throughout the night. As day was almost breaking, the greatest suffering befell us, for our enemies, after a brief respite, attacked us with the intention of destroying us completely. However, Yahuwah, blessed be his name, had compassion on us and freed us, bringing us back to the promised land. But even there we found no rest, for we had to be ever vigilant, defending ourselves from many enemies who sought to destroy us. Tired of these conflicts, we approached our enemies, proposing an alliance of peace. Just as the agreement was about to be finalized, a disagreement plunged us into an even greater conflict. As we heard cries from all sides crying out against us, we saw the darkness of another dark night descend. In anguish, we began to cry out to Yahuwah, saying, "How long will we seek peace and not find it? We long for the rest you promised us, but we find only the fury of our enemies. Help us, Yahuwah. How long must we wait?" As I cried out in my anguish, Yahuwah came to meet me and said, "Abraham, look up at the sky and count the number of stars." As I looked up, I saw the stars moving, forming small groups of 12. These groups, in turn, joined together 12 by 12, in perfect formations of 144 stars. Finally, the entire sky was covered by these stellar clusters. There were 40 groups in all, totaling 5,760 stars. As I wondered what the number of those stars could mean, I saw another special one emerge among them, growing in brightness and grandeur. Its growing light assured me that that night would finally be overcome, and we would reach a dawn of peace. The star, numbered 5,761, continued to grow until it became the size of the moon, and on it I could read in very bright letters the word Sabbath, and below the name of Israel. As the rays emanating from the sacred letters began to penetrate the darkness of the night, attracting the attention of many on earth, strong winds from the north began to blow, bringing heavy black clouds toward the star. A siege of darkness formed, while layers upon layers of clouds pressed down on the star, which, powerless to resist, faded until it was plunged into complete darkness. With a heavy heart, I continued to gaze toward the hidden star, never losing hope that it would be freed from the clutches of those threatening clouds. In different parts of the cloud-darkened sky, tiny points of light began to appear, grouping 7 by 7, until they reached a total of 483 stars. Undaunted by the threats of the dark clouds, they drew closer and closer until they formed a ring of light around the oppressed star. The brightness of these little stars revived the hope of deliverance, and the captive star emitted a faint ray of confidence through the clouds. As they drew ever closer around the darkened star, the 483 stars finally merged with it, imparting their light. At that moment, a great flash of light filled the sky, and all the clouds dispersed, losing their hold. The union of all these stars gave rise to a star of immeasurable splendor, similar to the sun. Hovering above it, in the shape of a crown, one could read, Yom Kippur, the last Jubilee has come. As soon as the star of the last Jubilee appeared in the sky, a small Bedouin came to meet us, carrying a heavy jar on his shoulders. His face was marked by a great struggle, but it reflected the light of the star, which gave him comfort and inexpressible joy. On his jar was written in large letters, "Babylon the Great is fallen, Babylon the Great is fallen, come out of her, my people." Approaching the 12 sons of Israel, the little Bedouin greeted them with a smile and told them he had come from far away, bringing them a message and a gift from the king of Salem. Curious, but at the same time suspicious, they sat and waited while the Bedouin removed from the jar the large scroll of the covenant made between us. Reading the accounts contained therein moved them deeply, leading them to understand that the one they had despised and handed over to death was the promised Messiah, the great Melchizedek, who, by virtue of his sacrifice, had freed them in that last Jubilee. Filled with repentance, they wept bitterly, but were comforted by the revelations contained in the king's manuscript, where the successive eras of history were recounted in rich detail, from the beginning of creation to that time. When they finished the reading of the book of Melchizedek, the 12 prostrated themselves reverently and praised Yahuwah for the consolation that he had sent them through such a humble messenger. Bending over the jar, the boy took out a small gold box adorned with precious stones, containing 144 pearls of varying sizes. Claiming it was a gift from Melchizedek to them, the Bedouin began to distribute them, 12 to each, starting with Reuben. These pearls symbolized the victory they had achieved through the realization of a new and eternal covenant with the great Melchizedek, who is the Messiah. After praising Yahweh for the pearls that sealed their victory, the 12, in a gesture of recognition and gratitude, began to honor the humble Bedouin who, through struggles and sacrifices, had rescued all those treasures from the darkness to offer them in this Jubilee. When I met Melchizedek that morning, I wanted to tell him my dream. But before I could say anything, he fixed me with a look very much like the Messiah's and gave me an order. "Abraham, now take the jar you love so much and take it to the Dead Sea, where I will show you a cave in which you will hide it." Taking a hatchet and a linen robe, the king accompanied me to the cave I had seen in the dream, where I sat to record these last words. The scroll will now be sealed and left in the silence of the cave, remaining hidden until it is opened before the nations in the last Jubilee.